I'm going to introduce, several of you know Jessica and Harold Piper, and they're going to share today. I shared one of my favorite things when I first met Harold was he came to church with a barely 6-month-old and a 1.5-year-old by himself. It was like in the winter time too. I mean, I was impressed that he ventured. I don't even know if I would have done that. And so I loved that. That was my first interaction. And I was just like, good on you. So it was very cool. So they're going to share a little bit today. And I'm going to, let's see, make sure, I don't want to mute myself. If you can just make sure you guys are muted so we don't pick up any background noise on your ends. And I don't know if I have to, I'm going to go to speaker view. No, not speaker view myself. What am I doing? That's not what I want to do. Okay. Well, I'm going to leave it at that. So here they are. Hi, guys.
It's so weird. Everybody's so muted. I'm used to like getting the responses back, but that's okay. Well, hello, everybody. So this is my husband, Harold, as you guys know. And I see my my mentor from my work. She's someone who I love dearly. She just signed in. Her name's Tess. So if everybody can wave hi to Tess. Hi, Tess. Okay, so we're gonna just share with you guys just a little bit about us. So Harold and I have been married for 10 years, and we have 3 little kids. I don't know when's the last time. It seems like it's forever since. So some of you guys haven't even probably seen the baby in person. But we have a 3-year-old named Harry, almost 2-year-old. And we have our 3-month-old, almost 4-month-old, named Reese. And so we just wanted to kind of take this opportunity. Lewis gave us a wonderful opportunity to come and share our story. You know, we're a military family, so a lot of times we come into places and out of places, into churches and out of churches as kind of passing through, because we're usually only in a place for a few years. And so this is our first opportunity to actually really get the opportunity to share our story. And I just want a couple of disclaimers. First thing is, our story is not rainbows and butterflies. It is not, you know, I talk about some of the abuse I went through and things like that. And so I just want to, I'm a social worker, so I just want to let you know if this does bring up anything for you, please feel free to talk to me about it if you want any type of help. And I just want to make sure that you guys know that that's available for you if it does. And then also, second disclaimer is I am not a theologian by any means. Harold's a little bit more well-versed in things like that. So all the things that I'm sharing are really things that are from my heart and my personal relationship with God. It may not be, oh, well, church doctrine or anything like that. But so I just want you guys to know that piece as well. And so without further ado, we just want to thank you guys for all coming in and getting to share our story. It's kind of weird doing this. I'm just looking at a little blue light, so we'll see how it goes. So, all right, well, Harold can go ahead and start. We're going to start with a reading from Matthew.
Yep. Good morning. As Jess said, we're going to read Matthew 17, verses 14 to 20. When they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. "Lord, have mercy on my son," he said. "He has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him." "You unbelieving and perverse generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me." Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed at that moment. Then the disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "Because you have little faith. Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, You can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Yeah. So, and the faith the size of the mustard seed is kind of the theme of our story. So I'm gonna move into my story. So originally from the Caribbean, from an island called Antigua. My parents, so I grew up in the Church of God. That's where my parents met, and so our family grew up in the Church of God still to this day. I was old enough to start school while we're down there. So the disadvantage of being from a small island is that if you're in school, a lot of times your teachers were either friends or classmates or maybe even family of your, parents or grandparents. In this case, all my grandmother's friends were my teachers, or I should say all my teachers were my grandmother's friends. So every time I got in trouble, my grandmother knew about it instantaneously. So by the time I got home, it was, yeah. But so my brother and I were both born in Antigua, and my parents made the choice that we want to immigrate to the States so that we can get a better educational opportunities. So they left we were comfortable, we're well off, not well off, but we're comfortable in Antigua to move to a different country where you don't have you're kind of in a different place. You're in a different place because your whole support structure is not there. We have family around the country, but where we're going to be moving to is going to be us, and then you have to kind of make your own way. My sister was born a year later, so leading up to when I went into the fourth grade, it's probably the toughest year in my life growing up. And in terms of thinking about you having your brother and your sister, and then not having your brother and sister. And I explained that my brother was his birthday was a year after or a month after, or a week after the cutoff date, so he couldn't start kindergarten, and school was going to let him start kindergarten. So my parents decided to send him to live with my grandparents in St. Croix. My grandmother was a teacher at the school, so she'd be able to get him into school so he can start there. At the same time, my great grandmother, my dad's grandmother, she passed away, and she was living with my grandmother in Antigua. And my dad and my mom made the decision to take my sister and have her live with my grandmother because she was basically working from home. And since for her being by herself, and also, with childcare costs and everything, using that as their support. And my sister did come home on the summers when we were home, when my brother and I were home from school. So we got to spend some time with her. And unfortunately for us, my dad is one of his best friends working the airlines. He was able to hop on a plane with my sister Laverne and fly back and forth, come back to pick her up and back and forth like that. So we were blessed in that. So going back to my fourth grade year, I'm an introvert. I'm not really outgoing. I kind of stay to myself. So, and at that point, we actually moved to a different school because we moved out of the house we're living in to somewhere else. So not only did I not have my brother and sister there, I also had to move to a different environment and make new friends. Which I said, I'm an introvert. I'm not really a person that goes out of their way to make a lot of friends. So during that year, when all three of us were in actually three different countries, when my brother came back, we were able to bond a little better. Before he left, we were kind of at, like siblings, sibling rivalries, butting heads all the time, telling on each other and stuff. After that, we kind of got closer. We played the Super Nintendo, all the stuff. Moved to Ohio. We had a friend group that we played with. But like I said, moved to Ohio from Florida. Then a couple years later, moved to South Carolina, which is where my parents have still been for the last 23 years. Once I graduated high school, I went to the Coast Guard Academy up in Connecticut, and then I've been in the active duty Coast Guard for the last 15 years. Been able to be stationed in Key West, New Orleans, which is where we met, St. Petersburg, Florida, Baltimore, and now Port Angeles, out here in Slim. And from this, we've had three beautiful kids, and then we had two dogs. One of which just had surgery on her leg on Friday, so she's recovering from that. So that's my story.
So yeah, that's his intro, I would say. And my background is a little bit different, but I'm always still kind of amazed and in awe of the strength of Harold's family, because they really are a true immigrant family, and you really see the sacrifices and the struggles that immigrant families have to make in order to have their family. Like you said, at one point, all three of his siblings were all living in three different countries, and they were little. They weren't, adults. They were children. They were, five and a few months old. Yeah, so that's still just it amazes me, the strength of this family. I actually, like I said, I'm not rainbows and butterflies. The story is not rainbows and butterflies at all. And one of my first childhood memories was of me being molested as a child when I was probably about 2. So that was one of my very first childhood memories. And then, we moved away from where we were, so the abuser wasn't around anymore. And it was like our life was pretty normal. I'm one of 5 kids. I'm originally from New Orleans, so y'all hear me say y'all quite often. And I'm the second of the 5 children. And life was pretty normal for a while, for about probably up until I was about 10. Then things changed. My mom, at this time, there was my sister, me, and my brother. And then my mom was pregnant, and she was 40 years old. So pregnant at 40 nowadays is not really that big of a deal, but about 20 plus years ago, it really was a big deal. And so my mom had some complications. And at the time, I said I was from New Orleans, but we moved around a little bit when I was younger. And we were living in Texas at that time. And my mom had something called a placental abruption, which sent her into preterm labor. And I just remember walking into the kitchen, and I was the one who found her, and she was on the ground, and she was just like bleeding out. And I just ran over to her. And I'm not somebody who memorizes Bible verses. Like I said, I am far from theological doctrine. But there's a verse from Corinthians that just popped into my head, and I just bent down and I whispered it to my mom, and I kept saying it over and over and over again. And it was, be on guard, stand firm in your faith, be courageous, be strong. And it's something that I remember to this day, and it is kind of like my own little personal mantra. But what ended up happening was my mom was medevaced to Dallas. And during that time, my little sister, who prior to this, the abruption, everything was normal and fine, and she would have been a very healthy baby, they lost her heartbeat. And so she was deprived of oxygen for a significant period of time. And when babies are deprived of oxygen, they experience birth trauma, which impacts the brain. And so my my little sister, her name was Katie, she had CP, which is like when the arms turn in like this. So she had significant CP, so she could never walk. Her mental capacity, she could never talk or eat anything. So she also had a trach to help her breathe. She had a feeding tube placed as well. And so she needed 100% full-time, 24-hour care. And from that moment on was when my life really changed. And I became very much I didn't have a childhood from that moment on. It stopped at that time. And then from then on, I was very parental. I was, I needed to take care of my brother. I needed to make sure my sister, was doing the things that she needed to do. I became the parent child, is what I would say. And my mom spent months and months and months in with my sister in the NICU, and I would go up there and visit her sometimes. And I just remember holding her, and she was just this like 2-pound, 10-ounce little being. And I just remember just thinking like her heart on my heart, and just like thinking of how much I love this little tiny ball. And her hands were so tiny and her feet were so tiny, you know, and I just remember just falling in love with her and saying that I would always, you know, protect her and keep her safe and just love her, because I knew her challenges in life were going to be significant. So then my mom came home finally, like it was like 9 months later or something at this point. And that's when things started to change for the worse for me. I just want to say my mom was an excellent caregiver to my sister, and she never did anything wrong or bad. But my mom experienced what a lot of caregivers experience, which is significant caregiver stress. The stress of constantly caring for a human being who has very, very high needs can create a lot of overwhelming stress. And if you don't have a way of dealing with that, that stress seeps out of you in some form or fashion. For my mom, it just so happened to be, she turned a lot of that stress towards me. And that's when my mom became physically and verbally abusive. It was to the point where, you know, it wasn't just like, you know, a spot on the butt or anything like that. It was to the point where, you know, she would beat me to the point where I would wet myself, and I'm like 12 at this point, you know, or, and she would say just the worst things imaginable about my appearance. And I don't know if you guys have ever met 12-year-old girls. They tend to be very sensitive about their appearance. And so all of this was really going on at a very fundamental age for me, a developmental age. And so I in my little 10-year-old head kind of said that it was all okay, because I was like a little sponge. I'm just going to soak up whatever, whatever to protect my sister. That's what I was thinking. Like, I'm just going to take all this in to keep her safe. And so after that continued on all the way through high school. My sister did end up passing away when she was 7, very suddenly. But for me, the damage had already kind of been done. I found myself getting into relationships that were abusive, because that was what I knew. That's what I knew. I didn't understand. I didn't know what unconditional love was, because the love that I ever received from my family very much had conditions. There were times when, for you guys who know, I sing, and I'm part of the worship team, and that was always like the thing that I was really good at when I was younger and as a kid. But as the abuse continued and as things got worse, I stopped singing, to the point that, like, he had no idea when we got married that I could sing. And for me, singing was always kind of like my form of prayer. It's my form of it's how I experience my relationship with God. And so over time that became silent. And so the relationship that I had with God became non-existent. And a lot of that, I think, is due to putting God into the role of the abuser. So for instance, that saying, God never gives you more than you can handle. You'll nod if you'll know that one. So a lot of times people say that, and I really do not like that saying, because what it does is I wasn't, it wasn't God that sent, somebody to hurt me when I was a child, or my mom to beat me, for lack of better words, and abuse me and verbally and physically. You know, what happens is when we do that, we put God as an abuser. We put God in the role of our abuser. And what it was is that I was a product of a broken world. Like, I was a product of broken people in a broken world. And broken people, the saying, they said, hurt people hurt people. Yeah, broken people break people as well. And so that's where I was at this time. But the thing is, I developed very good skills of being able to hide all of this. And so no one really knew what was going on with me. I would cover up the bruises under my school skirt, and or the fact that I couldn't spend any time with my friends or anything like that, because my mom was so had to know where I was at all times and things like that. I developed kind of a sense of humor about things, and I just kept everything very stuffed down and stuffed inside. But the thing is that no one really tells you about when you experience trauma. You can stuff it all you want, but you're stuffing it into a bucket with holes, because eventually all of that is going to come out. And so I'm trying to think where we are. Y'all have to apologize. We're still, so basically that's kind of where I was. I was somebody, I found myself throughout, my college career and everything. I would get in relationships with abusive people. I was in a physically abusive relationship for several years. I was sexually assaulted 5 times during that period of time in my life. And again, I didn't tell anybody. I kept it all inside. That little sponge was holding all that stuff really, really tightly, because I didn't want anybody else to be inconvenienced by my pain. And so then I met Harold, and I found somebody where I felt safe. I found somebody I felt safe with, and I found somebody who loved me. But even then, I still attempted to put him in the abuser role. And so Harold wants to share a little bit about how we met.
So how we met, Justin and I met in a place called Rock and Bowl in New Orleans. So as the name suggests, rock and bowl. So, little dancing and bowling.
Yes. It's a live music venue is what it is, with bowling on top of it. It's a very New Orleans thing.
They're oddballs down in New Orleans. So we danced a little bit. I don't think we bowled then, just danced and sat and talked. And then later on we went to go eat. So we went to a diner called Camellia Grill. While walking there, so she concocted the plan to kiss me.
No.
And so while she was walking in front of me, she turned and then tripped, right? And so I ended up having to catch her right there. And then all of a sudden, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. That's his version of the story. We'll let him keep it for today. So we met, and we were just kind of like smitten with each other, and we just really just kind of hit it off. We liked a lot of the same things. He really loved football. I really like football. We, were part active in our church. We were just very much in love with each other. And so we knew we wanted to get married. And so he let me pick out the ring, rookie mistake. And so on our way home, I said to him, I said, so like, does this mean we're like married or we're engaged now? And it's like, I guess. And so we pulled into the driveway at my parents' house to go tell them the news. And I said, hold up, hold up, hold up. No, you have to actually ask me to marry you. And so he said, okay. He said, well, will you marry me? And I said, I guess. And then we went in to give each other a kiss, as most people do at that moment. And we forgot we were still buckled up. So we went in and then we shot back, and it was just a funny memory. But then, we told my parents, and my parents were thrilled and excited. They loved Harold so much, and they were just so happy for us. His parents, not so much. They were not very happy, and which was a weird feeling for me because generally I'm a pretty charming person, I like to think, and I was always like the mother duck of my friends. So whenever they would have like parents, whenever we would be going out somewhere, they'd be like, "Is Jessica going?" Because then they would let their kids go because they knew they would get home safe because I take care of them because I do that with everybody. And so I was always like kind of the crowd favorite when it came to parents, and I was thinking, oh, that'll be the same thing, and it definitely was not at all. They were not happy, to the point that they actually flew down from New Orleans or from South Carolina to New Orleans to have a sit down with Harold and try to dissuade him or talk him out of marrying me, and which was kind of like I was in shock, to be honest. So
Yeah, so that was one of the earliest times where I kind of had a heated argument with my parents.
which to explain that, like to give you the background, Harold was a very obedient child. So for him to have any kind of pushback towards his parents is very culturally even a big no-no kind of.
Mhm. Yeah. So, it was a heated conversation, and, that I didn't agree with what they were saying, and the fact that they had upset Gus. So, that was really the crux of it. I think 10 or 11 months later, we ended up getting married. And then, so kind of like fast forwarding our story from there, still in New Orleans. So we had 2 years in New Orleans after we got married. During the second year, there were some small changes I kind of noticed. Really what it was once she finished graduating college, and then I think maybe part of it was kind of looking at like what's next, what do I do next, I think in that kind of maybe led to some things, but there was a time where she just said, "Hey, I'm not going to go to church." She didn't say I'm not going to church. As I said, Sundays would come. "Hey, you heading to church?" "Oh no, I'm doing something, I'm doing something where I'm not feeling well, etc." And then it kind of became more of a habitual thing. But I noticed that I didn't really kind of take the initiative and say like, "Hey, is there something going on?" Like, because back before, even in our first year, you were always, going to church, like, no one had to go behind you and say, "Hey, you coming?" or such and such. So so that went on, and then that led to our first move. So I don't know if anybody's ever seen or known a military move. It's very stressful because you have them, they come get your stuff, then you basically have a schedule of when you're going to get to your next place where you have to be by there at a certain time, and then you have to wait for them to bring your stuff. So we did that. I had to go. I was going to a ship, so that kind of further made things a little bit more stressful. because I'd be gone for most of the time, and she didn't realize that. And my first,
Communication isn't
Yeah.
our strong suit.
Communication,
I would definitely say. I had no idea that he would be gone. Like, I don't know what I was thinking in my head. I was like, oh, you're stationed on a boat. Like, I'm thinking like he just goes out for the day and then comes back in. No, he was gone for months and months and months at a time. And I was not mentally prepared at all for that. And not to mention, our stuff hadn't even shown up before he was already out the door. And here I am, our very first move to a place I knew nothing about. And our stuff wasn't even there. And he was already, out the door underway. And I was it was very much like a typical, like, welcome to military life, whack,
Mhm. Yeah. So she had to deal with all that stress by herself, for everything. And that was there's obviously a new experience. So that kind of added stress to an already stressful situation in terms of internally what she's dealing with.
Mhm. Well, and the thing was, he didn't know internally what I was dealing with because I didn't share any of the stuff that I shared with you guys just previously with him at all before we got married. So he had absolutely no clue what was going on. And I was still grieving the loss because my sister, we lost her, like I said, very suddenly. And this is the person that, I kind of dedicated my life to as a child, and lost her very, very suddenly. She just stopped breathing one day and she was gone. Like, she came into this world quickly and she left just as quickly. Um, and then also my grandmother, who I loved dearly, had just passed away as well. And so all of that was compounding, and it was a train that was moving and about to slam hard into a wall that he had no idea even existed. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah. So
So that's kind of where we were. And, when he left, I was in this place, in this space where I began to, I felt safe. And so I think sometimes when people who have traumatic experiences in life, when they do actually finally have a place where they feel somewhat safe and secure, that they start to unpack all of that and process it. And that is what was happening to me. Was so originally, imagine a bucket, and it's a wholly cracked bucket. There's little, big holes here, a little hole there. Well, right now it's all patched up with, a little Band-Aid or a piece of tape or some super glue. But when you get into a safe place, all of a sudden that bucket, those little, patches that you put on there to kind of keep everything contained, start to leak out. And that's what happened, is that all of that stuff started to leak out. And I was I was looking back on my life at everything I had been through. I mean, I forgot to mention the fact that I also, senior year was Hurricane Katrina. So my family had lost everything as well. We lost all of our clothes, our house, all of that. So mind you, all of these things, being molested as a child, physically abused, sexual assault, going through experiencing 2 traumatic deaths, and then going through everything with Katrina as well. Like, all of this was just this huge tidal wave that hit me all at once, and I just sank in deep. I was down in one of the darkest places that I didn't even know that you could mentally go there, to be honest. And I was at this point where I saw no value for myself or for my life. I had no relationship with God. I was pushing my husband away as hard as I could, and I was putting him in the role of an abuser. He didn't take the bait though, but I was trying to get him to be that, trying to get him to be mean and ugly and cruel. And eventually I got to the point where I just wanted to end things. Death became very comforting for me because I was in so much emotional pain and didn't have any help at the time. And didn't think I was to the point where I didn't feel worthy of even getting help, and so I ended up trying to kill myself. And I did it not once, but twice. I spent a week at a facility after the first time. I got out and then ended up 2 days later trying again and spent another week at the same facility. And it was funny because they did tell us when I first went in there, they said, that that sometimes you'll come back here. And I was like, yeah, right. I'm not coming back to this place. Sure enough, I'm the one of all the people of the cohort that was there that ended up getting back. So, but yeah. So that was where I was in all of this. And so Harold's going to kind of explain where he was watching me go through all.
Okay. We kind of run through a couple things. Yeah. So basically, going back to when she was talking about how we moved to Florida and we had stuff going on, and not necessarily all the specifics of everything that came out after that, but for me, I didn't know kind of what to do, and I wasn't necessarily somebody that went and asked for help. So I didn't go to any of my support structure, whether it be, friends, family, mentors, or, bosses or whoever, peers. So we just kept on not really communicating well with each other. And then it culminated for everything going back and forth. One day I came home and it was from one of our patrols. I came home and I was like, I'm unhappy. And then left an intense exchange. And then, basically back and forth going like, hey, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And then, Jess, I could see Jess is like, on the floor kind of broken at that. Then as we're going, she talked about everything else that happened after that. I kept on trying to ask God, like, hey, what should I do? Give me a sign on something to do, or something that I should be doing. That, is this a sign, or you're looking like, oh, wait, this thing just happened. Is that a sign, or is this a sign? And that caused a lot of stress. I didn't really tell my family what was going on. Like what we're going through. I think it was until like later that I kind of said like, hey, this is, something's happening. But so I didn't use my support structure. So I made a list of everything that that I guess that I felt was wrong with her. Is it wrong with her? Or she was doing wrong, I guess something? Like, hey, this is an issue, this is an issue. If I gave her that list.
Marriage tip 101. Never, ever give your wife a list of all the things you think that are wrong with her. It is not going to end well, no matter what you think.
Yeah, I think it's somebody else's. Sounds good. I did go and meet with our chaplain on base and kind of talked about like, this is what my frustrations were and everything. And then one thing he did say, like, recommend, like, hey, have you talked to your wife about going to counseling and stuff like that? And I was like, no, not really. So I talked to her, and then so she ended up being able to find a counselor down there that she could get, that got set up, and she started going there to help with that. We also did some couples therapy, couples counseling. That lasted for a little bit, but when your heart and mind are not necessarily in tune, so like for me, it wasn't really productive because it's kind of going through the motions because it's like, whatever. So I was still upset and everything. But, once, I think you said this earlier today, if your heart and your mind are not, close, not connected, then, if you're doing something, it's not going to be it's not going to be either fruitful or it's not going to be productive. So.
Yeah, like Harold's mind was mentally like, okay, listening to the counselor, here, but his heart was just completely shut off. And for me, spiritually, at this point, you know how they say, like we were talking about faith the size of the mustard seed. Well, what requires even smaller amount is doubt. Doubt can grow from literally nothing. And that's what happened is I was doubting everything in my life. I was doubting my love for him. I was doubting my relationship with God, which I basically didn't have at that point. But, the reason why we chose faith the size of a mustard seed is because we were at the point in our marriage where that was all we had left. And because the doubt had just been so powerful. And that's what, something that I saw in him was that he continued to pray and build his relationship with God throughout the course of all of this. And that really was something that inspired me during that time as well, was to begin to start, when I started to heal, when I started to process and started to understand the things that were done to me or the things that I experienced in life were not the results of, God's will. I started to be able to build that relationship again. I started to pray again. I started to sing again. And so that's kind of what ended up happening. And I credit my mentor here, Tess. She said, because I was talking to her about this, and I was saying, we're having this hard part kind of ending, what we wanted to say. And she kind of pointed out that we, because I told her, I said, I still sometimes to this day say, get fear, because I feel like I need him to say, no, it's okay, you're safe with me. But really what it is that we had to become strong enough to stand up on our own so that we could stand together. And that's what really happened for us. And that strength, we believe, came from God. It came from that faith that was as small as a mustard seed, but could move mountains. And it did. It moved Harold's heart, which was, it was stone cold. I'll be honest, because there were moments where it really was very painful. Because here I was, working on this list and trying to better myself and this, that, and the other. And it was like, now will you love me? But it really wasn't about that. It was that I had to realize the inner strength that I had and the ability that I had to be a strong woman of God, and his ability to, let God teach him how to forgive, for us to come together. And a lot of times, like in marriage, it doesn't just end, the struggles in life, that's not the only struggles we've gone through. They've kind of continued on with us, but what we've done differently is that we check in with each other. We remind each other that, that God is still at the center of our marriage, and that we have to still continue to be strong enough to be on our own in order to be a strong couple together. And so, for instance, we experienced a lot of really difficult fertility issues before we were able to have our 3 kids. I went through 9 miscarriages, which was very challenging. But, we just kind of took it in stride, to be honest. It was just, we said, in God's time. That's what we were feeling was, it's all in God's time. And for me personally, this mission, this inner strength that I have, has kind of led me on this path of just saying yes to God and serving God from that perspective. And that's what I begun doing. My therapist at the time, she said to me, she said, Jessica, because I was very upset that I tied a lot of my personal worth with what I was doing, like career-wise. And she said to me one day, she goes, Jessica, you don't have to just be one thing. Like, you don't just have to have one career. You don't have to, sign into this one thing and that's who you are for the rest of your life. And it just made so much sense to me. And she actually was the one who brought up, she's like, you kind of have the heart of a social worker. And I was like, well, what is this about? And so I started looking into it and started realizing how my experiences that I've gone through in my life can help me heal other people. And that's what I feel like. I just started answering those calls. So I started putting myself out there. And sure enough, now I'm an oncology social worker, and every day I just am blown away by the patients that I meet and blown away by their strength. And one of my patients said, which I was shocked to learn this, and I hear this multiple times, sometimes multiple times a day for my patients, is that cancer was a gift, is a gift to them. And the reason they say that is because they say, I stopped living my life for the expectations of others and started living my life for the expectations of myself and for me, the expectations of God. So I don't live my life to please other people, to live up to their standard, which is what I was doing for so long. I live my life because I feel that I live it up to God's expectations of me and my expectations of myself. And I feel that I am being called to take the brokenness that I felt in my life to heal the broken people that I've come across in my work. And so that's basically our story. And we just wanted to say thank you very much for letting us share that with everybody. And hopefully we weren't too long, but we really appreciate you guys. And also we wanted to say we really appreciate everything everybody did to help us with the baby when Reese was first born, all the food and all the gifts and everything. It did not go unappreciated, I promise. Thank you cards. They may take a while, but other than that, we were really, really grateful. So we just want to say thank you to everybody, and thank you for letting us share this moment with you. So